Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a yoga teacher at the advanced 500-hour level. I'm also an ordained minister, a kirtan artist, musician, amongst other things. Today I wanted to talk about how the world and the people in it are meant to disappoint you from a spiritual perspective. However, before I get into the talk today, I did want to give a shout out and a thank you to the community that makes these talks possible without any kind of paywall, and that is a community of my patrons on Patreon. So if you'd like to support this work, you can check the links below. You could make a one-time donation, but you can also on Patreon make a monthly contribution that allows me to count on the income and really treat it as a part of my work. And this allows both you and I to pay it forward. So for those who are in need, those who don't have money, those who can't afford subscriptions, whatnot, they can come here on YouTube and get the content completely free of charge. If you are on YouTube and you want to help out, you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. All of those things help tremendously. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about the world and the people in it and how they are meant to disappoint us from a spiritual perspective. So, have you noticed it? Or let me ask you, are you disappointed with the way you were raised, with your parents? Do you feel like they could have done a better job, that there were things that they did that traumatized you? Things that maybe you had a school performance and it meant a lot to your little heart that they show up and they didn't, and maybe it didn't even seem that important to them. Or maybe they said, well, honey, I'm busy, I'm working, and the implication I think that we take as children is, well, I guess work is more important than me. Of course, I don't think that's actually true, but again, the way our young minds perceive things may be very different than actually how our parents are viewing things and navigating their world. So parents, I find, is often an issue for many people. They feel that their parents could have done better in some way. Maybe not everybody, but this is very, very common, more common than not. And I've spoken a little bit about the importance of forgiving your parents, dealing with that, but that's not the focus of today's talk. But parents aren't the only ones. Partner. Do you have a partner, and do you find that they're lacking in some way? You wish they were a little more attentive, or you wish they gave you a little more space, or you wish that they wanted what you want, or you wish that they shared your interests and they don't. Whatever it might be. Even though you might find that there's a lot there that you appreciate and you love, and maybe you feel like, well, I can't do any better, I can't expect any better, and yet you will likely find that there are areas where you are unsatisfied. We can move beyond people to work. You might find that your work is similar. Perhaps you're doing what you love, but yet you might still find that there are aspects of your job, there are things that disappoint you. Maybe there are expectations you had and those have not been met. And we can even move more broadly into just your life in general. You might find you're at a certain age and you thought you would have checked certain boxes at this age, or maybe even you have checked those boxes and perhaps you find that, I don't really feel the way that I thought I would feel. I thought if I graduated college, if I got a good job, if I got a good partner, if I bought a house, if I had children, then I would feel full. I would feel content. And yet, I don't. I find that many people find me at that point in their life. Of course, some people find me when they are much, much younger. But many people, they go through a large part of the life cycle. I'd say maybe the first half, if you will. And so they've gotten the degree, they've gotten the job, they've gotten the partner, they've gotten the house, they've gotten the kids. Maybe the kids are even leaving the house at this stage. And yet, when they check in, they find, you know, I'm not satisfied. I don't feel how I thought I would feel once I had done all of these things. So I think, especially today with social media and whatnot, we tend to look at other people's lives and we think, well, they've got it all figured out. Look at these pictures. They're in Monaco on vacation. Look at that beach. They're sipping cocktails. Oh my God, they've got it all figured out. We see the family photo at Christmas of one of our friends' family, and they're all gathered around the Christmas tree, and it all looks so perfect. I get it. However, in my experience, when I talk with people who've posted these types of things on social media, what you find is the truth is not what you might expect seeing those photos. Those photos, again, are sort of the greatest hits. That's what people are posting online a lot of times. And so it looks like just perfection if that's all we look at. And sometimes we might find that actually, it may not be perfect. There are struggles there. And I've also found actually that sometimes actually beneath the surface there's rot. So not only is it not perfect, but it's actually rotten. That maybe the person posting that perfect family photo at Christmas, when you talk to them, you find out that they're actually getting divorced, that they've been cheating on one another, the kids are at each other's throats, these types of things. So in general, I wouldn't take what you see on social media as proof of anything. It really is something that we curate and we can control what people see and what they don't. And most people are going to try and curate that in a way that it makes them look better than maybe the reality. Of course, there's an exception for every rule. So maybe there's someone out there and we look at their Instagram and we go and meet them and it's better than it looks. We're already impressed with their Instagram and then we meet them. We're like, oh my God, wow, this person is even better than I could have imagined. But in my experience, most of the time this isn't the case. And it makes sense. I like to say that there's no such thing as an easy human life. And what's funny is we tend to look around and assume someone else is having an easy time of it. And generally speaking, I find that's not the case. And the only times that I find that that is the case is usually when someone has done a lot of inner work. I was tempted to say spiritual work, but I find that sometimes this inner work can be done through other means. I still actually think it is spiritual work, to be completely honest with you. But the people doing that work, they may not perceive it that way. So it could be perceived as psychological work. It could be perceived as work to become a better artist or to express oneself more authentically. That work can take many forms, but ultimately, from my perspective, that is ultimately spiritual work. So this brings us to the primary focus of today's talk, which is why do other people in the world disappoint us? Like, what's going on here? And my answer is it's not their job to not disappoint us, even if they think it is. And there are people actually who are out there who feel that way. So many parents I talk to, actually, they will take on this burden, if you will, and they will try and do better than their parents, which is an honorable goal, but they may not understand that it's inevitable that they will disappoint their children. And again, the reason for that is what I'm talking about today, which is the very universe, the fabric of it, the nature of it is no one is really meant to satisfy our desires, to complete us, to make us whole. Really, that is our job. So, as a result, what we will find is somebody could maybe do a good job of helping us or satisfying us or completing us temporarily for a while, but then we will eventually find that we are disappointed. As someone who is in the role of a spiritual teacher, I have seen instances where this happens around a teacher, especially usually teachers who might set themselves up as what we call a guru. And so people might meet this guru, this teacher, and they feel like, yes, this person is so loving and so accepting, and they are filling that hole, that vacancy that I have in my heart. Finally, I'm home. Finally, I found someone who doesn't have an agenda and they love me unconditionally. And if you follow these people, so again, we can take a little sliver of time, right? And in a certain moment, we might find someone does it. They tick all the boxes for a little while. That's what's interesting. So again, falling in love, similar thing. Oh my God, I found my soulmate. I found my partner. I'm done. I'm complete. I don't need anything else. This is how it can feel. So very similar with spiritual teachers, actually. Very, very similar feeling of, yes, I'm done. I'm complete. But if you follow people who've had teachers, very often those teachers will disappoint. And again, why? This is the nature of reality. And they might disappoint in many ways. Some teachers they eventually get involved in scandals. And this is because teachers are people. Even though they may be people who've done a lot of work and transcended many aspects of personality and their biology, humanity, we often find that there's still aspects of them that at least are perceived as imperfect. Some people, they just explain everything that their guru or teacher does away as, oh, well, that was a lesson. And that's fine. That can be a path toward wisdom, but it can also sometimes be just denial of the truth. Your teacher is just basically showing their humanity, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I tend to believe that all humans are actually human. And I think this is true of even great sages and teachers. I'm not denying that they might be capable of amazing feats that seem to transcend what we think of as being human, but I still question the idea that they consistently, every day, in every way, are transcending the human, because there they are. They're still in a human body. They are still a human being. They're using that human to communicate and to be present with us. So again, I have my doubts about that. And when you listen to people, you often find that if they talk openly and honestly, and again, they don't have blinders on, they will have instances where, again, they might have thought, it's over, I'm done, I found all the answers, and then perhaps their guru dies. Perhaps their guru sends them away. Perhaps their guru doesn't pay enough attention to them. Perhaps their guru says something that triggers them or turns them off. This again is expected. Same with romantic partners, right? We find the one, we fall in love, we have stars in our eyes, and that lasts a week, a month, a year, maybe even longer. But at some point, we realize we're dealing with another human being, and we are, again, disappointed. So the way that we are, I think, indoctrinated in our culture, at least I think this is true of myself, and I suspect it's true of others, is we often believe that, well, eventually I'll find the one. And this is, again, it's very, very analogous between spiritual teachers and romantic partners. They're really, really almost the same. Because people who are desperately on a spiritual path, they often are looking for that teacher the way that your average person is looking for a romantic partner. So the one, you need to find the one who's perfect. And we might find a teacher for a while who seems perfect, who seems like the one. And then eventually we're like, oh, they're human. They have faults, they have flaws. And so then we go back looking again. Same with romantic partners, right? Oh, they're perfect, they're amazing. And then one day they disappoint us. And again, just depending on our maturity level and other things, you might stay with the guru, even though they disappointed you. You might stay in the relationship, even though they disappointed you. But again, we find that it's not exactly what we wanted. It's not exactly what we would have hoped for. And so again, going back to our parents, wouldn't it be nice if we could be born and our parents are exactly what we need them to be? At least in theory, we think this. Except I think the reality is different. We actually need our parents to disappoint us. In fact, perhaps that's our first lesson, spiritual lesson, that our parents weren't what we wanted them to be, what maybe we even needed them or thought we needed them to be. As many of you know, I'm a huge fan of Byron Katie, and she likes to say to people who are dealing with such issues, if you want a mother, mother yourself. And this is a very spiritual perspective. It's one that is often shared in the manifestation community, the law of assumption community, in that if you want something, you have to give it to yourself, and then the outside world will give it to you. So we want love, we want unconditional love, we want abundance, we want all kinds of things, and yet we're looking out there for these things. And according to law of assumption, that's never going to happen, because you first have to give it to yourself. Even if by some trick of magic, the world gives you the things that you want. So you might say, if I had a partner, I would feel loved. And so you are affirming for a partner. Partner shows up. You say, now I'm going to feel loved. You might find actually you don't. Same with, say, a teacher. Oh, I want a teacher so I can be spiritual. Teacher shows up, and you might find that, interesting. Here's the teacher, and yet I'm still more or less the same. So again, when we look outward, we may even be able to manipulate the projection to give us something, and yet it won't give us that inner satisfaction. The opposite is also true, interestingly. We can give ourselves the satisfaction right here, right now. And the outside may not reflect that. And the thing that's interesting is if you give yourself the satisfaction, you don't care about the outside. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so now I'd like to read some from one of my favorite Zen teachers. This is Muso Soseki, or Muso Kokushi. and this is taken from the book Dream Conversations. This was given to me by one of my teachers, one of my gurus, Zen master, long time ago. And so this book has been with me for a long time, and it is a book that I turn to often for wisdom. So the first quote is, "If you forget your feelings about things of the world, they become enlightened teachings. If you get emotional about enlightened teachings, it becomes a worldly thing." So I love this quote because it's basically saying it's our attitude toward things that define whether something is spiritual or not. So again, so many of us think, oh, I need to go to India and find a guru and go to a temple, and then I'll be spiritual. I'll be doing something spiritual. Well, this quote here is saying that if you forget your attachments, your feelings to things of the world, they become enlightened teachings. And then if you get attached to and emotional about going to India and finding a guru and going to the temple and eat, pray, love, then that becomes a worldly thing. It becomes a worldly thing. Okay, I think a lot of people, it doesn't really enter in. It becomes a worldly thing. So in other words, you can go to India, go to the temple, see the guru, do all the things, and all you're doing is a worldly thing. You aren't doing anything that is particularly spiritual or transformative. So very powerful quote. All right, this next one, very powerful. "When people are unsympathetic to you and the world does not go as you wish, this should be a help to detachment of feelings from the repetitious cycle of becoming and decay, gaining and losing." So what he's saying here is that we can use the fact that the world is going to disappoint us. It is going to trigger us. It is going to make things difficult as grist for the mill. We can use that to further our spiritual path. So instead of, when things go wrong for you, instead of taking a woe is me, why me, poor me attitude, you say, okay, how can I use this to further my understanding of reality, of truth? Things are not going the way I want them to. Again, my parents didn't treat me the way I wanted. Wouldn't we all have loved that? We all have this idea that if my parents had just been more evolved, if they had just been more spiritual, if they had just shown up, if they've just been there, I would not be in the mess I am today. I would be whole. I would feel healthier and happier, and I would have better relationships, and I would be more productive. Well, these teachings are pointing us to the reality that we can use the defects in our life, in our relationships. Again, the fact that people are disappointing us, actually to fuel and push ourselves further spiritually. In fact, this may be what Jesus was talking about when Jesus said that it's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Somebody who's got it easy oftentimes does not ask the right existential questions. Now, it can go either way. So I have actually heard stories of people who become very wealthy because they grew up with lack. And so they build a billion-dollar business and they become a billionaire. And what they find is same thing. It disappoints them. The world disappoints them. The money disappoints them. This is it. This is all there is. This is what being a billionaire feels like. It's not what I expected. So I once heard a story about a psychotherapist who had a client who was a multi-billionaire. They had sold their business, and they thought that when they got to that point, they would feel satisfied. And so the therapist, you know, they were coming to therapists because they felt empty. And they were like, gosh, I really thought making $16 billion was it. And the therapist was very excited because they were waiting for them to have the realization that there's more to life than money. But the next week, the person came back and they were happy again. And they said, the therapist could immediately tell something had changed. They said, well, you seem better. What happened? And they said, well, you know, I was thinking about it, and maybe 16 billion isn't enough. I think I need to make 25 billion, and then I think I'll feel better. So this person obviously had not learned the lesson, and this can happen. So you might think that, again, a relationship is going to bring you that, okay, well, it wasn't that relationship, it's going to be this relationship. Oh, it wasn't that relationship, it's this relationship. So this shows up in all kinds of ways, but this was just a good example of that. All right, another quote from Muso Soseki. For those who know the nature of the world, lack of complete satisfaction or fulfillment in things of the world is in itself advice to cultivate detachment. If people do not crave to be pleased, they will not be displeased. What causes mental suffering is not the environment itself, but the mind itself. So, very Buddhist. It's interesting, as someone who studied both Buddhist thought and more contemporary manifestation teachings and thought, they agree on a lot. The Buddhist approach, though, basically says, again, this world is going to disappoint you. So you need to detach from wanting and desiring things. Now, I know this works because I have practiced this in my life. The Buddhists basically would say that you can't control what happens in the world. All you can do is basically learn to live in harmony with it, to accept the way that it is. And again, I can say this works. It's very powerful, and it's a great way of reaching a level of profound peace and joy in the midst of the world. So you're still living in the world, but you have found peace with it because you've basically given it permission to be what it is. Again, if I expect the world to satisfy me, then I will be disappointed because basically that's not how the world was designed. Eckhart Tolle talks about this as well, another teacher that I admire, and he talks about the fact that if you are satisfied in this moment, just wait. Just wait a little while. Again, if you're satisfied with your guru, if you're satisfied with your partner, if you're satisfied with your job, just wait. It is not in the nature of this world to stay static like that. And it's not in its nature to satisfy you. That isn't its job. So things right now might line up in a way that it feels like, great, everything is wonderful. It won't last. This is the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. So it's just a matter of time until things begin to shift and change and fall out of the arrangement that you find so pleasing. So what's been interesting for me is years ago I was introduced to the law of attraction. I think as many people, at least who live in the United States, were. There was a movie called The Secret, and the teachings of Abraham Hicks became very, very prominent and popular. And while those teachings make sense to me in a certain way, and I enjoy those teachings, I never really felt like it touched a deeper aspect. There was a certain disconnect in those teachings and, say, the Buddhist teachings and the other spiritual teachings that I had learned. Then I eventually, more recently, came across the teachings of Neville Goddard and the law of assumption. And interestingly, I find this manifestation community, at least from my perspective, really connects the dots. Now, I will say that in law of assumption, the idea is that you can actually get what you want from the world, but there is a paradox there, which is true of many things in spirituality. And the paradox is that the world isn't going to give it to you. You have to give it to yourself. So it's very interesting because this is a truth that I had hit on my own earlier, although it wasn't so clear in my mind. I didn't have a really strong conviction and viewpoint on why this would be the case, but it's just something I found. There's probably even videos on this channel. If you go back far enough, you might hear me talking about something in a similar idea, especially when I talk about not being a victim. So those types of things, because so often we want to give the power to the government, to the world, to groups of people. We feel put upon, we feel injustice, and in my experience, that makes us powerless. And so what we need is to take our power back. And that's just a decision that we make. We just decide, I'm not going to be a victim of, again, the government, of groups of people, of society, whatever it might be. I decide for no logical reason. Again, this is what's interesting about spirituality is we can just decide something. And this is what I really like about law of assumption is, in its most simple form, we just decide. Because again, it's called law of assumption. We just assume something is true. And what the law tells us is that if we assume it's true, if we give it to ourselves without reference to the outside, and that's the hard part, because most people are then looking, okay, I assumed it's true, you know, is it now showing up? And then when it doesn't show up, we assume, oh, it's not working. Because again, because it has the word manifestation, everyone really thinks that it's about getting something from the outside. But what I've learned in my journey, and manifestation, for most people, it is a journey. It's like a spiritual journey. I think it is a type of spiritual journey. So even though I've been on a spiritual journey for much of my life, now I find this is sort of a new path that I'm exploring. And it's not instant. Like most things in spirituality, it's you can hear something and it doesn't land, it doesn't fully mature in your heart and mind until later. So I find that's true with manifestation, law of assumption. I've been exposed to these teachings now for a few years, and I continue to unravel and understand them in deeper and deeper ways. So the teaching is basically that if you truly give yourself what it is that you want in heart and mind, so you could do that through imagination, you could do that through affirmation, whatever means you use, then once you've given it to yourself, it will actually show up in what we call the 3D reality, right? In matter. And this is different than what the Buddhists generally teach. Now, I'm not sure if the Buddhists or the Buddha knew of these techniques and they just didn't want to talk about them, perhaps because they felt that it was better for people to focus on detachment. That could be a cultural thing. Again, we find in the East, there's a lot of talk because of historically how things were seen. There's a lot of talk about letting go of this world, of detaching from this world, of freeing yourself from this world. And again, I can say from personal experience, there is a lot of power in that. It's ironic, but when you let go of the world, when you forgive the world, when you give the world and the people in it permission to be who and what they truly are, oddly, you start enjoying it. It's very interesting that as long as you're expecting other people, situations, things, people to satisfy you, they will not. But once you're like, okay, this is just this crazy show, I'm along for the ride, I'm just going to enjoy this movie. Oddly, it's a very entertaining movie. It's a very enjoyable movie. It's a fascinating, scary, exhilarating movie in so many ways. So if you know the right way to enjoy it, then it's enjoyable. And you can't tell me that scary isn't enjoyable, because there are tons of people that pay to watch scary films, slasher films. Why would anyone do that if being scared was so terrible? So the reality is, as a human being, we have capacity for all these experiences. And in my experience, the thing driving this body, mind, heart, is something that can enjoy all of it. If we let go of our ego identity, which is very small, very scared, and very controlling, and we allow life to move through us, if we truly allow that, it's all enjoyable. So again, this is a more Buddhist approach. The approach that I'm exploring now, and I don't have results at this point, I can't really say, but the approach that I'm exploring now is this approach of law of assumption, just assuming certain things and giving them to myself and not caring whether they show up in the 3D or not. Because the teaching is, again, once I've truly given myself that thing, I don't want it anymore. What a paradox. And in a weird way, this satisfies the Buddhist approach as well, because the Buddhists are saying detach, right? You don't want it anymore. So if you've had it, you don't want it anymore. It doesn't matter if it shows up or not. And according to law of assumption, ironically, then it shows up. All right, everyone. So as always, my intention in making these videos are for them to be helpful. If they are, and you want to help me and the community that create these videos, again, like, subscribe, comment, share on YouTube. If you want to go further, you can make a one-time donation. You can become a member on Patreon. And my friend and I have a shop of designs that we've made. You can buy shirts, hats, bags, mugs, all kinds of things with little sayings and logos from my teaching. So little things that are either fun or things that are just sort of reminders about things that I teach. And my friend is a really talented designer, so she's made some beautiful artwork to go with that. So it will also be in the links below, so please check that out. All right, everyone. Till next time, namaste. Have a beautiful day.